Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Shivers is over. Thankfully.
If you think you're not afraid of the dark, if you think you have a strong stomach, if you feel nothing can shock you, if you say you don't scare easily, if you believe you've seen everything, then prepare yourself for a motion picture that takes you beyond fear, beyond your wildest nightmares, and brings you face to face with terror, beyond the power of priest or science to exercise.
Andy, sometimes you need to just kick out a little body horror. Am I right?
That's what I always tell the kids.
That's right. Sometimes, kids, you gots to do a little body horror. And so for some reason, I let you talk me into jumping into a series after Robin Hood that was my most experimental explorations in film. It's not my favorite genre, and I'm learning. This is good. This is exposure therapy for me. And so here we are. I don't know why this exposure therapy had to start with Cronenberg, but it did, and now we are here.
I think we went with Cronenberg for a couple reasons. One, he's an interesting director and somebody who has a clear vision, certainly is interesting to talk about. Two, he's a director that we have explored a few of his films in other series. We talked about The Fly. I can't remember what the series was now.
Maybe it was a Halloween horror extravaganza. Who knows?
It might have been a horror thing, yeah. And he did The Dead Zone.
Yes, The Dead Zone, which was slower than I remembered from my youth.
It was. I still like it.
Yeah.
It still has a lot of stuff going for it. And to that end, it would be one that I'd be interested in revisiting, certainly. The Stephen King aspect and the Cronenberg aspect. And because we had touched on those two films, I thought it would be interesting. You know, we should look at more of Cronenberg's early works. I have seen very few of the films that we are going to be discussing. And so, I thought, let's kind of explore Cronenberg from the beginning and kind of go through the 80s and see what makes him tick as far as a director goes.
Had you seen Shivers? Was it one of the things you'd seen? Okay. All right. Good.
No, the earliest film of his that I'd seen, I think it would have been The Dead Zone.
Oh, okay. So this is
I hadn't
great.
seen any of these early films. Yeah.
Wonderful. This is good for both of us then, for different reasons, but good for both of us. So what did you know about this film going into it? Did you kind of have an idea of what to expect?
Okay, and I take it back. I had seen The Brood and I had seen Videodrome. So I don't know why I totally spaced those two.
So we've started off by just straight up lying.
I'm lying to everybody.
Lying to the people. I think the only one of these that I've seen is Videodrome, and it was I was conned into that.
For some reason, I pegged you as a Scanners guy.
Oh, I've totally seen Scanners. That's on our list
we're
too.
Both lying to the people.
I have already. The lying is commenced.
Yes, and I had seen Dead Ringers, but it was after.
Oh, I've also seen Dead Ringers.
Yeah, right.
All right.
This is
not going well.
Garbage. This is. What are we doing?
If Andy or I tell you the sun is shining, please, people, go outside and look up first. Okay.
Wow.
Now, let's erase all that. Back to the beginning. Why Cronenberg? and the early parts of his career. I feel like this is a great place to start. Mine as well. Start at the beginning. This film, it has an interesting statement, certainly a visual statement, visual notion on body horror and on the nature of humanity and sex. This movie is a big sex movie, and that is, I think, for my experience with it, at least visually, I think what this movie represents is both the blessing of the movie and the curse of the narrative, and the things that I had a challenge with it. In what you know of Cronenberg and your experience with Cronenberg, does this early exploration of body horror meet your expectation? What do you think of its portrayal here?
I would say that it does, because the whole notion of body horror and things kind of happening to your body, and in this case, it's this parasite that is being genetically created by these scientists to basically act as a transplant that kind of turns into the organ it's supposed to be replacing, so that it can, become a functioning liver if you need a liver transplant or whatever. Instead, it turns into what basically looks like a giant slug of some sort, or in the realm of body horror, it looks like a penis crawling around and attacking people in kind of this sexual way, and it's like trying to get down their throats and basically take over their bodies and turn them into a sex-crazed person. And so to that end, there is this element that Cronenberg has of things like this, that kind of your body and this technology kind of come together. In this case, it's not like, an actual piece of metal or anything, technology that is incorporated into your body. It's just the technology has created this parasite, and now this parasite is changing you.
Yeah, and we've talked about this. We talked about this with The Fly. It's that fear of science, not just technology. Yeah. It's that fear of unknown, non-human innovation that is the source, the root of terror.
And I think that to that end, this fits in very well with Cronenberg. And so I think as a start, I think right out of the gate, he's kind of hitting exactly the mark that he's targeting. But it does make me ask the question, because horror is so often kind of considered an easy genre to jump into filmmaking when you have a very small budget. Is that what makes this film stand out? Like for people in 1975 checking this movie out in the theaters, is it simply that element that stands out? Like what makes it seem different than another kind of monster slug sort of movie?
I love how you put that.
I know 1975 was full of them.
Full of them, right? Because horror is the filmmaker's gateway genre. You're absolutely right. Like if there's a gateway drug, this is it. It's easy, it's fun, it's easy to shoot. Everybody's willing to do it. Your dad will do it. Like everybody will do it. And so, yeah, I think that's interesting. The challenges I think that the film had that I find really interesting were much more sort of a nationalist nature. This being coming out of Canada, that this film was a real challenge to Canadian national cinema, and the fact that it was partially funded by the Canadian Film Development Corporation posed a real challenge for getting this stuff made. And so I wonder, just to get back to your specific question, if the things that make this stand out are the, not necessarily any particular innovation in the body horror arena. They weren't coming out of Canada, those films, but they were certainly coming out of California, certainly coming out of the East Coast. But I wonder if it was just all that added to the controversy of this film coming out of a place that didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously there's an audience for these types of movies, and it found its audience. And but also, that's one thing about horror, is that it does find its detractors. And certainly when it is a project that is partially funded by the country, I can see why some people might take offense. Anytime any art project is funded, it goes under a lot of scrutiny when it's public funding, because people look at that and go, I can't believe that our money is going to fund trash like that. And inevitably you'll hear that conversation. And it's I mean, I guess filmmakers can look at that as one of two ways. One, it can be frustrating because it makes it harder to get that money. But two, once you have it made, it can certainly help boost the interest in the project. I mean, we've seen that happen countless times where it spurs people to have that curiosity about the project and can potentially increase the box office revenues.
Have you, I mean, I'm thinking about my own. The projects I work on are so small and they're so private. And yet you run into exactly the same thing. The people who give you the money feel like once they have interest in giving you the money, that they have interest in having a say. And even after the things are produced, and I know you guys have produced some things that have that are controversial, far more controversial than I do. And so I wonder how that hits you. Does this experience feel familiar?
I mean, I have not been in a place where we've had quite that much controversy as far as the funding of projects. But certainly when you are doing a project and there is a company that is providing funding, yes, or a person, they are going to want a say. And it really boils down to kind of the negotiations at the top of the whole thing to figure out how all of that's playing out. There are some investors who believe in the artist and what the artist can accomplish and feel comfortable saying, here's the money, do what you do best and make something great. And, hopefully I'll reap some rewards at the end of it. But it's not always that way. And sometimes it's like you got to do a lot of whining and dining to make that happen and continue to do it. I know that's something that Terry Gilliam talked about. I believe it was on the documentary, the kind of behind the scenes of the failure of his Don Quixote movie back in the early 2000s, when the investors would come to set to tour, and he kind of just felt like he was on parade and had to, he was on this stage and had to do all this stuff for them just so they could leave so that he could get back to doing what it is that he wanted to be doing. It's a difficult situation. And inevitably, I think there is a dance that you have to do. I don't feel like Cronenberg had to do that. From reading the kind of the articles and kind of the commentary and everything that came out of it, it sounds like he did all the stuff and made his movie before people realized what he was doing. And all of this came after the fact.
Well, and that's the greater source of controversy of this movie is the fact that people want to say in the movie after it's already made. And, the most notable review, Robert Fulford was editor of the Saturday Night Magazine. His commentary on Cronenberg and the Canadian Film Development Corporation was, if using public money to produce films like Shivers is the only way that English Canada can have a film industry, then perhaps English Canada should not have a film industry. Ouch.
Ouch.
Interesting angle on the whole Canadian piece of it, too. Quote, no maple leaf and beaver sentiment, no going down the road to a new Canadian awareness. This was Richard Labonte, of the Ottawa Citizen, and he's criticizing the film for not making good on the tropes that make a Canadian film Canadian. That there you couldn't tell it was a Canadian film, and that was a central problem of it. I guess they all should have had some maple leaf jerseys on or something.
To that end, Strange Brew would be like a perfect example of what they're looking for.
Strange Brew is exactly that sort of film. So, and this is a time where Canadian cinema was at a real divergence, right? Trying to figure out where allegiance lies artistically. And it from what I was reading on it over this week was that there is a real sense that at the time, Cronenberg's film comes out right in the face of Canadian national cinema that is largely following Europe in its sense and sensibilities of cinema. And this film came around that just smashed Hollywood horror tropes in their faces, and they weren't ready for it. I think that makes this film notable, certainly more notable than the horror tropes that play on screen.
Yeah. It's an interesting subject to discuss as far as like watching Cronenberg kind of get a start here.
Yeah.
Through these complexities of dealing with all of this. And we should say with producer Ivan Reitman, who was his producing partner for this film and his next film before he went on to Animal House and kind of all of the comedy that really made his career. But Cronenberg is a person who I think will have success, but from reading interviews with him, it sounds like financing has never been an easy prospect for him. And I can imagine that when you're making this type of film and you have detractors like Fulford and Labonte and a lot of other movie-going public, it can make it difficult to get your projects made when they are much more specific and, for some people, pretty obscure and uncomfortable visions.
Yeah, and case in point, interestingly, as we talk about the Canadian critics who had such trouble with this film, it was Ebert that gave it, I think 2.5 stars and said, kind of surprised me. It was good.
Yeah.
That was,
right.
There we go from the American critic. You want to talk a little bit about dig into the movie now?
Yeah, let's kind of look at it. So it's an interesting film the way it's set up. It's basically a film that takes place on an island, and it's like it's not quite like a resort, but it's like an apartment living situation where it's like this community has everything they need for the most part in this apartment complex that's on this island. And to get back and forth, they just have to cross a bridge over to the mainland.
Right. It's a self-contained community, and that's a big flagship architectural development. And it celebrates all the tropes of modernity, this thing, the Starliner. It's this giant, the angles that they shoot it looks like it could be a big ship that just sort of unmoors and takes off into the ocean or takes off into the sky. It's like 70s industrial chic, I imagine it's just what they could find to shoot. But it looks like 1975, modern, and they open the film with this cross-cutting between all kinds of different scenes. The workaday going on in the building, this video sort of tourism guide of the Starliner, and a horrifying murder scene of an older gentleman murdering a schoolgirl.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
It's a great way to kick off the film. First of all, that slideshow was perfect because it really kind of sets up that marketing sense of places like this,
yes,
where you're kind of seeing just all of the glory of what makes it a saleable property and something that people would be interested in, leading right into what's his name? Like the guy who's like the tour guide, basically.
Right.
The manager of the
with
property.
The lisp.
with the two Swedish people. I think they were actually like Mr. and Mrs. Sweden, I think was actually what they're, or Sveben, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
As he's showing them kind of the great aspects of this place. And then we do this wonderful intercutting. And that right away set this film up on a pretty high mark for me, because that great kind of that cheeky slideshow leading into some really interesting intercutting that doesn't tell us, like that murder scene that you talked about, it doesn't tell us anything as to what's going on. What a great way to kind of start a film like this, where you have this situation happening, and only later do you start realizing what was going on in that particular room with this doctor and this girl.
Yeah, I have to tell you, it may come as a surprise. I loved the way this film opened. I really do. And I actually, I'll go even further. The introduction of the other characters, Tudor, who is this kind of a nebbishy business guy, works, I guess, in insurance, I'm gathering. And he, his first stop from his leaving his apartment is another unit where he's clearly been having an affair. He's the one who discovers these bodies.
It's that girl's apartment who gets killed in the beginning.
Right. The girl's apartment gets killed.
So
he's the one to discover all this. I find that whole thing, and how trusting Cronenberg is with, what he is putting on screen, that we'll get it without telling us anything. I mean, he's just artfully showing us how all these characters work together, live together. It confirms our understanding of the Starliner as our setting and the sort of insular nature of it. It absolutely puts into place the relationship between these people. I really loved it, and I think the film it starts off at a peak, and the stars just start falling off from there.
Well, it's an interesting and tricky film to set up, because we have a lot of characters at the beginning. We meet the manager of the hotel and this new couple, and we meet Nick and his wife, and kind of we sense the distance that there is with him as far as she's concerned. We kind of meet this doctor who's killing this girl. We meet the other doctor, kind of like the building doctor, Dr. St. Luke.
St. Luke. He's the new guy on the job, right? He's satisfies a familiar trope.
And along with the other doctor, Linsky, and they kind of have a working relationship. And we meet the nurse that Dr. St. Luke is sleeping with. And so just a lot of different people that we kind of get to know. It took me a while to figure out, like, who am I following here? I didn't know who the protagonist was. And it took a while for us to get to a point that you're like, oh, it's Dr. St. Luke. I didn't realize that for a while.
Well, and I think some of that goes to Paul Hampton's truly understated performance as Dr. St. Luke. He could stand in as any generic science-y CSI background character in that opening room. He could stand in as any generic kind of office worker. And it took me some time to figure out, I need to look at that guy, at that generic blonde guy, in order to understand the story. You know what I mean? Like it was so understated, maybe to a fault. I was challenged by that. The fact that Lynn Lowry as Nurse Forsyth keeps paying attention to him and then eventually starts taking her clothes off in front of him it was telling that he was central to the film.
Well, and that was another situation that was a little, I like, these are elements where there's a line, I think, that Cronenberg is walking as far as presenting information for us that, like, we have to catch up and figure out what's going on, like everything happening in that upstairs room as the girl gets killed. We have to kind of play catch up and figure that out. But then there are things like this with the doctor and his nurse and kind of what's this relationship all about? And, is she crazy? Like, I think that there's a line that he's walking as far as trying to stay ahead of us and just using it to his advantage, especially in the realm of horror. Like with the doctor and the nurse, my immediate thought was, oh, I wonder if she's already been taken by this parasite and now she's going to come after him, only to find out, oh no, they just have this relationship. I think that it's interesting the way that Cronenberg is playing these elements, but I also feel like you can kind of tell a little bit that it's a first film because some of it is a little sloppier than it should be. It made it a little harder to tell what was going on at times and harder to connect to the characters because I don't think that I think that there are elements where he has an assured hand as far as what he's doing, but there are definitely elements that also that hand is not as assured.
Well, it's a funny thing. I couldn't tell in parts what was intentional and what was, rough or sloppy, as you say. It felt in part very much like the opening to Romero's Dawn of the Dead, where you have this busy, TV news place and we've got new characters we have to meet and we're in the station and we're moving through the station and we're in and out of the station. You're not quite sure who to pay attention to. We have some horrific things going on in another room, in another location that we're kind of following. And all of these things come together in, eventually you've built the team. And that's what I feel like we're doing here. Obviously, it's not quite as frenetic as Dawn of the Dead, but what we end up with here is ultimately a bunch of 70s sort of toned and structured individual character narratives coming together, and it felt reminiscent of Romero in I think a good way.
Yeah, that's actually a great comparison. I think that there is that element of kind of giving us these little stories, and then we just kind of start latching on and going, oh, okay, Janine seems like she's going to be the person from that thread that we're going to kind of follow. And We've got St. Luke as the person we'll follow from that thread. And we've got Linsky, and you start kind of piecing this together. And I think what it does is it doesn't really give us a strong protagonist to follow, but it gives us a lot of supporting characters to kind of watch. And it's interesting the way that it unfolds because some of them start turning or getting taken, I guess, by the parasite before they all ever really kind of come together. And I thought that was actually pretty interesting. Like you start kind of setting this up where we are going to move towards something where we might have a team, but it never quite gets there because some of the people just don't, they don't make it. They get caught.
Yeah. And that's where it starts to fall apart. Part of the reason I just to pile on a little bit with the no strong protagonist thing is that I just don't think Paul Hampton is a strong protagonist. Yeah. Right. And so I struggled with that all the way to the very end. I think this movie is short on strong protagonists because they don't exist. And even if the part was there, we didn't have someone carrying it. The challenge I have, if there is any challenge to be had around the antagonist, is the parasite. And I really struggled with the nature of the parasite. I want to step back to the pre-parasite conversation, though, because I think this is really important. We have this intention of taking a parasite and making it an organ replacement, and I was 100% in. That is cool. And I can already in my head go down the road of seeing where this science, this technology is going to fail and things are going to go south. And then we have this turn where the St. Luke and Linsky are reading the research of the doctor who killed himself in the beginning. He was the one who was supposedly behind all this. And there's this giant twist, Andy, and it was the most deflating twist I have ever seen. And I'm not a student of these films, but this one, I feel like this was terrible. It turns out that the doctor wasn't trying to build this fantastic parasite at all. He was trying to unleash a sexual plague upon the earth. Andy, that's dumb, right?
It's a problematic element of the film. And that is, for me, I think the biggest element of this film that feels like a low-budget horror movie that isn't necessarily Cronenberg. It feels like, the bad end of somebody wanting to make a sex horror.
Yeah.
We're going to unleash a parasite that's going to turn everybody into sex-crazed maniacs. Okay, I feel like I've probably heard of a movie like that before that's not this one, because somebody's probably made it, just so you can get more people kind of having sex on screen.
And believe me, I'm a pro-sex guy. I am in favor of the sex. You know what? Sex is great. Enjoy it. Really? Unleash a sexual plague upon the earth. It snatched defeat from the open jaws of victory. It was going to be a great setup, and then he just lit it on fire, and I lost complete interest in this. And I thought, this is a movie. This is a guy who's not ready. That's what we're watching here is a film that's not been workshopped enough. It's a film that is not, nobody stood up and said, hey, you know what? The first act, we already locked that. Let's just go with what we had there. We don't need to do this.
They could have even, and this is rewriting a little bit, but even if it was like this whole idea of this parasite that replaces an organ, if they had replaced, a surgery where somebody had lost, like a guy had lost his penis or whatever, and they tried to use it for that, and it worked, and he was a perfectly functioning male again, and then that parasite breaks free or kills the guy or whatever, turns him into a sex crazed maniac and breaks free. And that's the thing that starts running around. That would have made more sense, because then at least it wouldn't have seemed like this far-fetched nonsense of this doctor who has this crazy idea of this insane plan that he has in place.
I can't wait for you to listen to the show after I edit it a little bit and hear what you just said. About the sex crazed penile transplant actually being believable. I can't wait. I'm
just saying, I feel like I could have bought it more. Oh, this is going to be a fun few weeks talking about all these body parts and organs.
Well, now I think we have an Avatar listener, which is the guy who lost his penis in a combine accident, and he's really needed a replacement, and they found a parasite virus to do the job, and it goes crazy. It's like idle hands, but idle penis. That's where we are. Do I need to click the explicit tag for the Cronenberg series just because of our questionable use of penis?
It's an odd idea that this doctor came up with, and then I don't know, a lot of issues. I'm questioning, why is he killing her at the beginning? Did he realize what he's done and is trying to stop it?
Yeah. And you know what? I find that's fine. A number of reviewers have latched onto the parallel, calling her his typhoid Mary, right? She was patient zero. She's the one who started it all. And I like that. I mean, that feels good. He was trying to fix something that was going wrong. He didn't know that she was sleeping around with half the people in the place.
The sort of thing that I feel like a doctor should know before doing something involving sex.
Yeah, right. That is a checklist. That's a checklist they hadn't invented in 1975, Andy. They've closed some loopholes. They still had
the little key game that I learned about in the ice storm.
That's right. So, all of that is is fine. I bought that. That's okay. I can handle that. And I really struggled with everything after we discovered that, and I thought it was just such a weak story decision that it truly, it was Hannibal's March to the Sea for me. I just felt like he lit everything on fire, and I love the sort of zombie style. But now back to my questions about the parasite. I don't understand. I don't understand the horror part of the parasite, Andy. The parasite. Let's just say the parasite's a thing. It comes in. You're doing your laundry, like the lovely lady who's doing her laundry downstairs. The parasite gets at her. It injects some sort of a thing, and it makes her want to have a lot of sex.
Right.
So far, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of what I can only classify as inconsequential horror in the last half of this movie. Like, there was blood, and like I don't know why there was so much blood, because really, ultimately, the people in the pool at the end seemed to live, and then they got in their cars and drove away to have a lot more sex with more people. Like, where was it seems weird for me to say, where was the threat in this sex parasite? It just made people want to have sex. I don't understand that.
I think that there's blood when it sometimes gets in you.
Okay.
We know that. It can create a lot of blood.
I guess there's blood when it comes out.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, Tudor, it came out his mouth, and Tudor was fine. If anything, I mean, we call it a parasite, but might even call it a symbiote.
Yeah, it's an imperfect situation.
I feel like I put you in a very difficult situation here, having to justify all of these threads.
No,
do go on.
I don't think I'm weakly justifying it, because I think it is fairly weak, the way that all of that plays out. I just don't think that it ends up. It doesn't end up working as well as it could, because of the nature of what he's decided to do with this thing. And because, I mean, it seems like it's this bloody slug that mostly seems to go through your mouth and come out your mouth into another person. And once you have, I don't know, I guess it lays eggs inside of you, and you kind of kiss somebody else, it goes from your mouth into theirs, and then it lays its eggs or whatever, affects your brain, and all of a sudden you're a sex maniac too. The way that I saw this film, it was almost as if there was a reaction to like STDs and this whole idea of what sex can do, and it turns you into, like, you get infected and it's invisible, and it turns you into somebody that you're not. You're now walking around with this disease. And it seemed like there's an element of that where that's the fear, is that you want to stay away because you don't want to be infected by all of this. And I think he's playing up the fears of losing control and kind of that's kind of stampeding sexual appetite coming at you that infects you. I don't know.
Well, and there is a sort of statement that I got out of it on the sort of nature of repression, and I think that is, to me, what I read just in the film, about sort of a cultural response, right? That if you live in a culturally repressed, sexually repressed culture, right? And then this movie is making the statement, and we have that in the Starliner, right? The Starliner is as sterile and sort of anodyne, kind of repressed, a numb place that you could create, right? It is just, it's not a festering bed of anything fun. And what this movie says to me is, like, you let industrial chic take over, and what you're going to have is explosive response. You're going to have a response that is, we're going the other way too far, too fast, and we won't know what to do with it, right? It will be, well, if you try to repress sexuality, we're going to be hypersexual in response. And if you're going to repress scientific experimentation, we're going to do things that are going to cause, great damage and so I think that is this movie sort of is trying to walk the balancing point between so many of these different elements that I think that's where it struggles. And when you apply the narrative tools and the narrative choices that Cronenberg made in the script to some of these much more complicated cultural sort of metaphorical statements, I think it just loses the thread. It doesn't sell it. The film doesn't sell those statements well because I just don't buy the big bad. I don't buy the evil. I don't buy you. What you've made essentially is a recruiting program for orgy camp. It looks like I liked a lot of these people much better, after they were sex crazed maniacs. Let's go to the pool.
Well, they liked each other too.
They did. Everybody liked each other. It was just like, if you could get over the entrances and exits of the parasite itself, okay. If you get over that, everybody seemed to be having a good time.
Yeah, except for Nick, who, the parasite came out of his stomach. And so, there are certain situations that it's a little more problematic than others.
Yes. True.
And I think that there were situations where people were violent toward each other because of the aggressive nature they were trying to capture somebody and the way that those people were trying to fend them off.
Yes. That's, again, that's the other side of repression, right? That hyper everything.
It's interesting. I think that there is an element of kind of that the fear of like that groupthink or just kind of being pursued by a mass that I think Cronenberg captures pretty effectively, notably when St. Luke runs out, he finally gets out the front door of the place and starts running up the hill only to turn right back down and run down because, as we see, there are hordes of these maniacs who are coming toward him now. Yeah. And I think that that's something he captures really effectively, of a group of people coming toward you that you can't stop. It's this mob mentality that they have now, and you are their target. And how frightening would that be? I think John Carpenter's captured that well in projects like Prince of Darkness, and I think that Cronenberg captures that well here. And it does make me wonder, because of the nature of this apartment complex, that it's a very middle class sort of place. It does make me wonder if there is some commentary that he's making about kind of very similar, again, to what you brought up earlier, Dawn of the Dead, and this nature of this middle class humanity that just kind of goes along being part of the herd.
Yeah, I just think Dawn of the Dead does it better. I think Dawn of the Dead, there's some cultural threat, right? There is you get the threat by way of these things are scary. At the end of the climax, as he goes back into the pool, and there's just a whole bunch of people coming in saying, we're totally going to have sex with you right now. And I thought, okay. So, yeah. All right. Well,
and then we end it with them all, he is one of them now, and they're all getting in their cars, and they all leave the property, crossing the bridge to go basically fulfill this doctor's crazy plan of turning the world into a basically a sandals.
Well played. It's this ending that actually brings it back to the thing that is that I think Body Snatchers has all of the takes on Body Snatchers have done so well, which is the idea that you are no longer in your control and in your own control, that you're being sort of manipulated by this other thing that has now made you a vehicle. And I think that is the missed opportunity of this movie. Let's say clearly I'm in favor of the sex premise. I don't like that I just feel like the movie came off the rails with a weird twist in the middle that was unearned, and I think not a great choice for the movie. And I think the ending would have paid off better had it stuck to this to more of a of that sort of loss of control, the Body Snatchers type theme, than we're just going to show a lot of people trying really hard to have sex with each other. It just got so cheap. It got so cheap in that sort of end of the second act that I just didn't care for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The body horror nature of it has this penile slug creature that is, projecting itself into your face, basically, in order to turn you into one of its followers. And that is kind of the body horror element of this.
It's not in that point, and it's not that scary.
No, but it's a foreign object, though. And I guess that's the thing. It's this technological thing that has been created. Science made this thing, and now it will turn you. So, I mean, it's yes, there's the sex element of it that does make it all kind of comical. But in the end, you are still no longer you.
Yes.
Like, it's not like these people are going to go back to their day jobs and they'll all have sex whenever they want to. They're not themselves anymore. They are essentially zombies. It's just sex zombies as opposed to eating flesh and blood zombies.
Okay, but this is the problem that I have. There's a sequence where he goes into, one of them goes into a darkened room and closes the door and looks through the people, and there are those two guys in the yellow and blue underwear.
Yeah,
and they're coming down the hall, and they look up into the thing, and they are absolutely lucid, right? They're not mindless. Like, he didn't create, this parasite doesn't create the same kind of terrifying, mindless zombie people. It creates people who are essentially just amped up.
Yeah, same thing with the manager. He convinces those people, it's like, hey, your locker's been broken into. Come in here. We've got some stuff of yours.
Right.
And those people follow him, but it was a trap to lure them in. And those are elements, I think, that affect the quality of the story Cronenberg is creating here, because I don't think they end up creating as effective a world as far as the context of world building goes.
Yeah.
That makes this story make sense for me.
It feels uncertain, like he's just not sure around any corner. I don't feel like I'm in capable hands here, that he's leading me down something where he knows where it's going at the end, right? It seems like every choice in every scene is just on the wrong side of arbitrary. Not surprising, but uncertain.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And I think Cronenberg would... and we'll find out. I feel like he is going to get better at telling stories that are a little, that can use a little more clarity as he kind of progresses in his filmmaking.
We've mentioned a number of names on the thing, and in terms of, I've not been a student of Cronenberg. I don't know who his people are. Does he have a group of people that he's going to be dragging along with him? Any particular names of note that we should start to learn?
Off and on, there are going to be people throughout this that we will see repeating. Starting out of the gate, there are a few... Well, there's one person, the person who plays the hotel manager or the Starliner manager, played by Ronald Molodzik. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name. This is his last time working with Cronenberg. He will be in Rabid also. But he was in Stereo and Crimes of the Future, which are the two kind of avant-garde features, the short features that Cronenberg did before this film. So right out of the gate, he's already had one person that he's worked with a number of times. And Joe Silver, he is in this as Linsky. He is going to be working with him 2 times, this and the next film, Rabid, and likewise Ivan Reitman that I already mentioned. So,
who also did double duty as music supervisor on this film?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Funny.
It is, yeah.
Small budget,
I was
many
curious
hands.
about that.
Right,
exactly, right. But as we progress through the 80s with Cronenberg, it will be interesting to see, who else has he had on that he has kind of become a regular collaborator with. So we'll kind of keep track of that so we can see.
How to do an award season.
It's a horror film. It wasn't kind of a big horror or a big award thing, but it did end up taking one award, and that was at Sitges, the Catalonian International Film Festival. It did win. It's a horror film festival, and I believe it won first place for Best Director. David Cronenberg got the Medalla Sitges en Oro de Ley. So that was his prize for this film. But that was it. Still, out of the gate, winning Best Director. I think even with issues that we are bringing up, people can see there's something about the way that this film was made that it's not just another space slug attacking people movie.
Well, it is certainly it certainly has some courageous elements to it. I would say both in the story and in choices that the director made here. So I'm interested to see where it goes. How did it do in the box office? I know you have your little black book. You've been tracking this one to the penny.
Cronenberg was working with a meager indie budget of about $175,000, really small. As you said, part of which was funded by Telefilm Canada. That is about $830,000 in today's dollars. Really, I mean, I've made indie features for that much, so it's right in line. The movie did have a limited release in Montreal on October 10th, 1975, before getting a wider release across Canada and the US. That wider release triggered the Parliament of Canada to debate the film's social and artistic value upon society because of objections to its sexual and graphic content, which you had brought up. And perhaps because of that debate, the film ended up becoming Canada's highest-grossing film up to that time.
Again, to our point earlier in the conversation.
Right.
Well done, Cronenberg.
Right. Oh, so funny. Unfortunately, I could not find any actual numbers about how much money it made in Canada. All I could find was how much it made in the States. The film did go on to make $185,000 or about $880,000 in today's dollars. Even with that small amount of money, the movie did end up with a profit. Just based on that, the adjusted profit per finished minute is $573. And I guess my final point is just know that that number should be higher. Assuming that, the Canadian box office wasn't dinky, that the highest grossing film of all time at that point in 1975 in Canada, obviously there was more money to be talking about here.
It seems pretty meager. $573 per minute. Okay. All right. It's a start. So you know where the bar is very low.
Right.
Well, Andy, this was a great place to start. Obviously, it's the right, appropriate place to start our exploration of the early films of Cronenberg, and I think we should probably rank it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this show. You can swipe over, tap the word Flickchart in your podcast app of choice. It should take you right to this movie, where you can rank it yourself, add it to your list, and see how it stacks up against ours.
And we should say that Shivers did go by a number of other names, the Parasite Murders and They Came From Within. And actually, that They Came From Within is how it is listed on Flickchart.
Well, and I'm surprised that you didn't include in that list the original shooting title of the movie, which was Orgy of the Blood Parasites, which I think we could all agree should have been the final release title. But,
pretty much.
Canada,
pretty much.
Come on.
It does make me wonder, why was it called Shivers?
Yeah. Did you, did you get?
I don't feel like I have
Shivers?
an answer. I feel, is that what its intention was?
No idea.
I feel like it was named Shivers because it sounds like a horror title.
Yeah.
Like
Shivers,
the Parasite Murders sounds better.
Yeah.
They Came From Within sounds better. Orgy of the Blood Parasites sounds the best.
Oh, yeah. We don't even need a judge's ruling on that. Huge missed opportunity.
All right. First up, we have Shivers or A Star Is Born, 1937.
Well,
I'm going with A Star Is Born.
A Star Is Born. Yeah.
Yeah. Shivers or Robin and the Seven Hoods. I'm definitely going with Shivers.
I think I'll go with Shivers too.
Shivers or Ocean's 12.
Ocean's 12.
I'll say Ocean's 12. Shivers or Lupin the Third, The Castle of Cagliostro.
Lupin the Third for me.
I'll take Lupin the Third as well. Shivers or Compulsion.
Compulsion.
Gotta go with Compulsion. Shivers or The Host. Interesting.
So Host. So Host.
I'll take The Host.
There you go.
Shivers or Christmas in July.
That was a lovely little movie. I'll take Christmas in July.
I'll definitely take Christmas in July. Shivers or one from our last series, Robin Hood, Men in Tights.
I think before the show tonight, I probably would have gone with Men in Tights. I think I might take Shivers. I could be easily swayed, Andy. You have a lot of power here.
I am, I'm going to go with Shivers.
All right.
Shivers or La Femme Nikita.
La Femme Nikita.
Nikita, please. Well, that lands Shivers in spot 313 on our chart. 313 out of 419. Or about a 25% on our chart.
25%. I'll tell you, it surprised me. A couple of things have surprised me here. First of all, that you and I are in quite as much agreement on this film as we are. I don't know what I don't know. I guess what I expected was that you were going to be more bullish on this film than I was, just because of the genre bonus. We'll call it the Andy Nelson horror genre bonus, plus 2 points. And
that has been known to happen.
It has been known to happen. I feel like, so that surprised me. Also surprises me that it did more poorly. It did worse on our flick chart than it did on my individual flick chart. How did it do for yours?
It did better on my flick chart as well. It landed about 50%, 2101 out of 4203. So it's almost smack dab in the middle of my chart.
Mine is exactly smack dab in the middle of my chart, 704 out of 1408. Yes, I've been ranking. And so that's 50%. If I'm going by the algorithm, that should be straight up 2.5 stars over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel. Do you agree?
I was at 2.5, but after our conversation, I feel like I'm bumping mine up to a 3 and a like. I feel like despite the issues with the film, there are some interesting elements that are worth thinking about and revisiting.
I feel like eventually I might get to a 3-star on my personal. I am not there yet. When I first watched this movie, it was last week, and I full on washed my hands of it, and I was like, 1 star if it's lucky on a good day.
Wow.
I was done. Right now, and I had to re-rank it a number of times to just feel like I'm getting to the right place. And I feel much better about leaving it right at 2.5 stars. And I'll give it a like. And it's a thing I might even watch again. I think it's an interesting contribution, and I like what it did to me, Andy. I didn't have to turn it off or go to the bathroom too many times. I did all right. I made it through. I'm proud of myself. So it's good. I'm learning. I can be taught.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Where do we go from here?
We're going just a couple years in Cronenberg's filmmaking. We're going to be looking at Rabid, which, again, worked on with Ivan Reitman. And this will be an interesting one to kind of explore as they kind of continued the horror trope, and in particular because they cast Marilyn Chambers, a porn actress, to play the lead character in it, to attract more people for that horror audience.
Well, that's telling. If I recall, not even just the casting, but just the movie itself was of greater controversial renown than this one. Am I right?
I am not sure, but
okay.
I will. That'll definitely be something that we can talk about more next week.
And you haven't seen it?
I have now.
Oh, you have?
I just watched it yesterday.
It's like we're talking in the future. All right. Well, this has been great, Andy. You know what they say when the movie ends?
Our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
They sort of gaveth.
As Amazon sometimes doeth.
They sometimes giveth. I went down. I think you went high this week.
Maybe.
Do tell me, Andy, where do you sit on this grueling line of inquiry?
As of yet to be determined. I think I have a decent one, but you know what? I've got a 5-star to go with. It's not great, so I'm just scanning other stars just in case I find something that I enjoy more.
I'll let you have it, and I'll start then, knowing now that you will actively not be paying attention to me as I share my review. This is a 1-star from Blue Science from 2003, who watched this on DVD and says, "Mr. Cronenberg, a thief? Well, I thought he might have borrowed some ideas from Pasolini's Salo, but it appears they were released around the same time. If anyone's been light with their fingers over this movie, then it's George A. Romero. Reprehensible use of minors in this picture cannot make this anything other than a 1-star, but see it for Paul Hampton as Dr. Roger St. Luke. His performance rocks.
The way your voice was going, I thought you were going to say his performance was sexy.
I felt sexy as I was saying it.
Well, if it made you feel sexy, maybe that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Yeah.
I guess I'm landing on my 5-star. It's not that exciting of a 5-star, but I couldn't find anything that I was really excited about on 3s or 4s either. So this is a 5-star. Matthew Rabe simply says, sick, totally gross, totally ludicrous, totally creative, totally fun.
And as it turns out, he was just reading the marketing copy for the Starliner. Indeed. Thanks, Amazon. And more importantly, thanks, Canada. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We are highlighting adaptations from Season 9 over at our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. That's the site where listeners can purchase the source material for all of our adapted film discussions.
We had a big Robin Hood series this season, looking at 9 different versions on screen. Many were likely adapted from Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, including Douglas Fairbanks in Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and the 1991 Robin Hood, and Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Robin and Marian was specifically based on the ballad The Jest of Robin Hood.
And we really don't have too much to say about Robin and the Seven Hoods.
We talked Dead Ringers for our David Cronenberg series adapted from Barry Wood and Jack Geislin's novel Twins.
Have you checked out that show?
I haven't, but I've heard great things.
2 comedies from our Steve Martin series were adaptations, Pennies from Heaven from the BBC series, and The Lonely Guy from the book by Bruce J. Friedman.
The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was part of our Colin Higgins series, adapted from the Broadway musical.
Spike Lee brought us Black Klansman from Ron Stallworth's memoir.
And we looked at a trio of John le Carré adaptations, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Little Drummer Girl, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Plus, all 3 movies in our Agnieszka Holland series were based on books, Europa, In Darkness, and Spore.
La Cage aux Folles and its remake The Birdcage both came from Jean Poiret's original play.
We also talked about Arsenic and Old Lace and Charade in our Cary Grant series.
All of these were based on other material, and it is all available on our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. Every book purchased supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations we've covered and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.